Next up, we have our client configuration. So our client configuration, wireless. Again, this is something I jumped the gun on. I got excited. I started showing you our open authentication or encryption versus our pre-shared key. This is usually in a personal or very small office, okay? You don't want to use pre-shared keys in an enterprise environment. It's just not scalable. Next is Mac-based, so we're going to actually allow or disallow equipment. That is equipment-based authentication. Problem with equipment-based authentication is if I authenticate a computer, I'm not authenticating who's in front of it. Next up, WPA Enterprise. This is with Meraki's own radius server or a radius server of my own choosing. So really good options there for security. And many of them we've talked about before. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look at my environment. You can see that we're going to be dealing with our access control for a certain SSID. So here we are, our SSID. We have our different SSIDs available. The Rust one is the one we were working on. We have the ability to use these different associations, these encryptions, these splash pages. And then down here, you see the client IP assignment. So we can use NAT mode, bridged mode, or layer 3 roaming here. This allows clients to move within our environment using static IPs and going over to the different APs in that geographical location, but they're not going to be reassociating every time they move to an AP. That roaming is going to be much like we saw in a wireless LAN controller. It's going to be passing the client information on, and we are not going to have to reassociate every single time. All right, so this is WPA2 pre-shared keys. These pre-shared keys is nothing more than a passphrase or password that we're inputting. You're very aware of this. This is what you probably use at home. Now, when you use WPA2 and these passwords, please remember there are things out there like Hashcat and things in Linux penetration operating system distributions that allow you to try and break these. Please use long passwords with multiple types of characteristics. Do not use short passwords. Those are easily crackable these days. Even though it is WPA2, you want to stay away from the smaller passwords. The longer the password, the longer the amount of time it's going to break that password. Next up, we have WPA2 with Enterprise. Again, I jumped the gun and showed you this already. This allows Meraki authentication or a radius server authentication. So we do have the ability to use a radius server for authentication from that AP. Really, really nice. Even though it is cloud-based, we are given that option. Next up is web authentication. Now, web authentication gives us the ability to do guest access and how we want this actually showing up to any guest who attempts to join our network. Now, I'm going to do a demo for both web authentication and that radius service we talked about. So here you can see I have the ability. Let's talk about that radius server first. We have the ability to use Meraki authentication or my radius server. If I choose my radius server, I need to drop down here below and add my radius server. Now, when I speak of a radius server, I'm not talking about one that's in the cloud with those Cisco servers. I'm talking about a local server that handles a radius environment. So this would be local to my SSID. All right, let's go ahead and leave the page there. Let's go back to wireless. Let's go back to SSIDs. We're not done discussing this yet. Let's talk about, or just go here to edit settings. You can see that this one has Meraki authentication, but what we were talking about here was our ability to do our splash pages for the guest users. First option is none. That means the user can access the network as soon as they associate. This is a little different. I don't want you using this in your organizations. At the very least, use click-through. The users must acknowledge a splash page before they're assigned to use the network. Next up, you can set up guest user accounts, temporary accounts that people are allowed to use. And you could use sign-on with Meraki authentication, or we could choose a radius server, an LDAP server, or some other third-party environment that allows us to keep track. Facebook Wi-Fi, so again, we can allow them to use their Facebook, uh, users to check into their Facebook page so you know who they're using. Next up, SMS authentication, so users entering with a mobile phone. Billing, some type of billing access, so we can use paid access to this. And then systems management, Sentry control. Only devices with SM can access this network. Systems manager, you need systems manager to do this. So this is for our guest access again. So lots of control over what's happening. I do not want to save these changes. I don't want to mess up this ID. So I'm not going to save this. I'm going to click cancel here. So that's it for the web authentication, and that's basically an overall view of how to configure a Meraki access point. Now, the Meraki access point, as you can see, had full feature sets, many of the same features we saw at a centralized AP. This is a pretty cool configuration. That being said, not good for everyone, right? There are some security threats that could happen. It is cloud-based and more open to accessibility from anyone with a with network connectivity and certain information about you, right? Your user account and password. You're not going to see that same type of attack plane available within our wireless LAN controllers that are locally sourced. They would actually have to break into your network to get that type of access. So a bit of a difference there, but with this ease of access also came a lot of information, right? I was able to use that mobile environment to access things. So overall, a great solution. I kind of like it, but it depends on your environment whether a Meraki solution is best for you, whether cloud-based is better than our normal infrastructure implementation.